office upstairs, and with COVID, so now it's her play and craft room and her reading room, and I had to move all my stuff downstairs.
Oh, well, hopefully your downstairs is somewhat comfortable for you.
It is.
Okay, good. Suzanne, I'll stop talking.
Okay, I think I'll go. I turned the recording off when I entered the room, so I'll turn it back on, and then we can have get going on with our evening. Whoopsie, wrong way. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Suzanne Lynch, and I'm an instructor with Alberta School Council Association. With us this evening is Emily Milne, PhD, and she is an associate professor in the Department of Sociology at MacEwan University. She is an applied sociologist and community-engaged researcher who uses theory and research methods to engage with social issues, contribute to public understanding and disclosure, and address issues in real-world settings. Her goal is to engage in and work in the community with community partners by listening to the needs of community partners and working collaboratively on projects that respond to identified needs. For many years, she has been involved in community engaged projects in partnership with schools and school divisions, parents, caregivers, as well as elders that aim to support Indigenous students by identifying educational inequalities and developing school-based policies and strategies to reduce them. She has published many journal articles and book chapters, as well as numerous reports for government and school divisions on topics including education and reconciliation, educational inequality, social policy, family-school relationships, and community engaged research. Her research has also been and received national media attention and has been featured in several news outlets, including Global News, TV, the Globe and Mail, the National Post, among others. Welcome and thanks for being here, Emily.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that nice intro. That was nice. I didn't know if you'd read the whole thing, and we talked about that and you said, oh, we thought maybe all of it's important. I said, okay, go ahead, say all the things. So I'm going to share my screen. Ah, look at that, very fancy. So oh, look at that, all these skills I have, I guess. I think my email should come on too. Ah, look at that. So my name is Emily Milne. I am here to do this presentation about exploring meaningful ways to engage parents of Indigenous students. And again, my name is Emily Milne. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited that I get to share with you today, get to learn. I got to learn about the association as I was having meetings with Wendy and things and getting ready for this. And I actually I'm really excited about your organization, and I'm really happy that I get to share and be part of your meeting today. So with this presentation, I'm going to be drawing on data from a larger program of research on schooling and reconciliation. And this presentation draws on data from interviews and focus groups. The main thing I'm going to be talking about are kind of these three areas. So number one, experiences and perspectives related to family and school relationships, and also parent-teacher interactions. Here specifically talking about the experiences of Indigenous parents and students as well. Also, I'll talk about promising practices to foster meaningful relationships between Indigenous families and schools. And then I'll also talk about how this learning can be extended to the work of school councils. So first, I wanted to, Suzanne gave a good introduction to myself to give you a bit of information about me, but I wanted to also just, highlight some things and let you know that I'm a community engaged researcher. Over the last 10 years, more than that actually, I've been doing work in the area of education, and more specifically, education policy, inequality, and family-school relationships. I moved to Alberta in 2016 from Ontario, and when I came here, I really wanted to get kind of situated within the community, within the schools, find out kind of what was going on, just get involved and use that as a way to kind of inspire and drive and guide kind of my activities. So as a faculty member, we do research, service, and teaching, and all of the things I do, all of them are in community engaged. all the things I do are involved with community. So I just thought, you know what, I should start spending time in community, listening, learning, and, you know, just absorbing, you know, all the things I could learn. And so I spent a long time volunteering in schools. And so over time, I built authentic relationships with teachers, administrators, students, as well as elders and knowledge keepers and Indigenous liaison workers in various schools. And my projects have emerged naturally from those relationships. And so, for example, I've learned about, what some of the needs are, what, some of the challenges, some of the issues within schools. And my projects have grown naturally from those relationships where people say, let's work on this, or let's get involved in this and work together on this. And so all my projects have come from that place of being asked to get involved in things, and have all been based, from relationships, and projects have grown naturally from that. So that's how I became involved in this work that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And I'm a longstanding non-Indigenous ally of European ancestry, and I work and live in Treaty 6 territory, a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples. And the work I'm sharing with you today, I'm not the only person who has been involved in this work. I'm just the one sharing and presenting to you today. But Indigenous elders, knowledge keepers have been engaged and included in research activities and processes. So all the things I'm going to be sharing with you today were, I was a piece of the broader project, a piece of, one, component of a broader team of people. It's just that I'm the one sharing information today. Yeah, and so by including all these different people, I really feel that, make sure that the work I'm doing is meaningful, relevant, culturally responsive, and respectful. And so that's kind of where this work is coming from. So I wanted to give you a bit of context of this topic that we're talking about today, related to, authentically engaging parents of Indigenous students. This is very timely and also very significant. And so education policy, discourses, and actions have placed, increasing emphasis on the role that parent engagement can play in children's educational success. And obviously, I'm probably, talking to people who have already bought into this idea, right? Because you're all part of, school councils and things like that. So you're, already people who are, familiar with this, involved in schools, or, familiar with schooling, and wanting to kind of be involved. So, this is something we hear over and over and over again: parent involvement in schooling, and how this makes such a big impact on students' experiences in schooling and overall student success. And so this idea that we have educational policies and things that are really advocating for parents to get involved in schools, this is supported by research showing the positive impact of parent involvement in schooling, like homework help and those kind of things, on children's educational performance. And so we do see this echoed kind of in, it's a long tradition within our academic literature talking about the benefits of family involvement. However, for many Indigenous families and communities in Canada, the legacies of residential schooling and other negative schooling experiences have kind of contributed to this disconnection between home and school. And so all parents can have difficulties or a challenging time kind of connecting with schools and teachers. However, Indigenous families, the way I kind of talk about it or think about it is that there's kind of this layer of complexity to that relationship. So, lots of families can have issues connecting with schools. How do I ask teachers questions? How do I advocate for my child? But, given the broader history, and that, is definitely part of, many families' relationships with schools. And that's an important consideration for sure. And so for many years, for many Indigenous families I've spoken with over the years, their parents were not involved in their education, and there was not that shared understanding about the need to be involved and be interacting with teachers. And I have this quote on my slide. Sorry for the silly question, but I see all these lovely faces on the right. Do you see my whole slide?
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure. Okay, so on the slide here, I do have this quote here I wanted to share. So we have to go back historically, and this is from an Indigenous parent. We have to go back historically why we are this way, which brings us to residential schooling. My parents both went, when I was going to school. My parents taught me what they learned from their experience. You better go there, you better listen, and you better do whatever they say. My mother would never ask the school or teachers questions because that's the way she was taught. So again, that broader context of that historical relationships with schooling, those negative experiences are part of those conversations that I've had with all the parents that I've chatted with and had that I've worked with. Definitely part of how people think about schooling, and part of that relationship with schooling, that history is there. And so, more specific to your context of school councils, not all parents can attend parent council meetings. And if a parent is not attending school council meetings, that doesn't mean that they don't necessarily care about their children's schooling. They could have obviously wanting to support their children, loving their children, but there may be other reasons why they may not be able to participate. There may be lots of reasons why parents can't show up at school or can't attend things. And it doesn't mean that they don't care or they don't want to be involved. It just might mean that there's perhaps this broader context and things that is part of the reason that may be preventing them from coming. And so parent involvement can reflect, again, that broader personal historical context. And that's really what I'm hoping to highlight for you today. So to provide that kind of context about families, I wanted to again highlight some of the research I've done to share some of the experiences that parents and students as well, and I also talk about some teachers here about what they've shared with me about their experiences to kind of give you some insight about what people are experiencing. So again, to provide that context about the importance of engaging parents of Indigenous students, I'm drawing on data from a larger program of research that I mentioned on schooling and reconciliation. And so the quotes I'm going to be sharing with you in a few minutes are drawn from this project. This whole project is informed by these voices and people who shared with me. And so it's 201 Indigenous students and teachers and parents of Indigenous students connected to an urban Alberta school division. And this is the breakdown of individuals who participated. And we went through ethics protocols and things like that. So everything was deemed ethical and got through all the processes. And I also wanted to highlight, because this is a research, some things I'll highlight about the research projects I've done. I wanted to just highlight that the research projects I've done, the research designs have always been intentionally respectful and responsive. It was extremely important for me to make sure that everything we were doing was very respectful. And part of that meant being and working in full partnership with Indigenous elders and Indigenous educators, and having even advisory councils kind of guiding the work that we were doing. And so in terms of being respectful and responsive for how I did this work, it meant consulting with elders about cultural protocols, offering protocol, sharing a meal, gifting, facilitating and organizing, the focus groups, what it looked like, how we could do it, as well as efforts to authentically engage kind of everybody involved. So every school that I was in, also kind of connecting with the Indigenous liaison workers or other staff that can help kind of guide and direct, making sure that the activities and things that we were doing in the school was, was meaningful, significant, was something that did reflect also the local context and the school community as well. So every, focus group and engagement event that we had was tailored to each school that we went to. So now I'll kind of share some key findings again to kind of talk about these key findings, and specifically I'll talk about, as I mentioned here, family school relationships and parent-teacher interactions. And again, this is to provide that broader context related to engaging Indigenous families and schooling, and specifically school councils. So family school relationships. So I'm going to share this, some quotes and things like that, some experiences. So what parents said, and then also what students said. So when I asked these questions were about, defining and understanding parent involvement and family school relationships. So what does this mean to you? Can you define it? Can you help me understand what this looks like in your perspective? And so from an Indigenous parent lens, I heard very loud and clear, that parents were identifying a disconnection between home and school due to historical legacies of residential schooling and negative schooling experiences. They expressed the need to build that bridge between the education system and Indigenous parents, and also recognized the need for a dedicated effort to build strong connections between parents, children, and the school. Parent involvement was also linked to the responsiveness of schools and educators, and a feeling that they were being heard and welcomed into the school. So feeling their voice was heard at their children's school, and that they had kind of a shared understanding about what and how their children were doing in schooling. And then from a student lens, students spoke about instances when their parents were involved in their education, some describing their parents as feeling welcome and comfortable at the school, and feeling comfortable helping with homework. But students also spoke about barriers to involvement, including, work schedules, which is something we talked about even earlier. Like all parents, have challenges related to work schedules and things, in terms of kind of showing up or even attending presentations like this, or, the busy life at home with children, juggling these different things we have. But students also talked about, extending that to, referring to that broader context and things. Students were very quick to talk about the limited trust that many parents had of the education system and the broken relationships between schools and home. And so significantly, students associated the role that their parents had in their education with the issues that their parents had experienced when they attended schooling. Some said their parents preferred even not to communicate with schools unless there was a problem. Again, given that, that they may have had a challenging time in schooling, and it kind of brings up those memories and things like that coming into schools, as well as their parents and family members that have had negative experiences. So I'll share some quotes here. And so this first quote here, an Indigenous, so this was a parent who was also a teacher. And so this, individual said, so because of colonialism, because of residential schools, there's a natural blockade of some parents because they don't see school as a positive thing. To have that non-blockage between you and them is very important. And then this next quote here from the Indigenous parent, they said, I've tried coming to the table many times before, and they just really won't listen. And then this last quote here, a lot of Native parents did not go from high school straight into university. We don't know what it's like. So that idea of, I'm not really sure how to support my child's education. I don't know where to start. I heard that over and over again. I'm not sure how to get involved. Even if parents wanted to, they maybe were unsure about even how to go about doing that, given that their parents may not have been involved, and that they, again, may have had a negative experience with schooling. So trying to navigate that, not really sure how to do that. And then quotes from students here. And so the first one here, top one. So this student said, I think that's where a lot of intergenerational trauma can affect parents too, because they're scared to do stuff like that, scared to come in and speak out and speak about different issues. And this student said, the second quote, I don't think any parent really had a good experience with school. Even when my mom went off reserve for schooling, she faced a lot of racism. Her teacher was racist to natives. My grandma had that too. And this last student, saying there's sort of a lack of trust with school with some of the older people. Oh, for sure, 100%. So that's something that would need to be worked on before they would come. So before parents would come to the school. And I also want to say that this, I had an engagement event, a focus group with, I was sitting in a circle with 20 Indigenous students as part of this project. And one of the questions I asked them was, are your parents or caregivers involved in your education? To which all 20 students either said no or shook their head no. And a student said, for example, not mine, no, people said no. And then I asked a follow-up question and I said, did your parents have a good experience with school? And again, everybody said no. So now I'll shift and talk about kind of experiences with parent-teacher interactions. And again, this just gives you that broader context of, experiences that people have had interacting with schools. So parent-teacher interactions here. So parents, so when I asked about, interactions with, so here talking, I'll share from a parent lens and also from a teacher lens. So when I was speaking to parents, when I was also speaking to teachers, these were things that they brought up. So when I said, interacting with teachers, having conversations with teachers, or here having conversations with parents, asking questions related to that. How did it go? What are your experiences, right? And so through a parent lens, here, parents spoke about the importance of having a voice and being respected and valued by teachers. They shared many examples when they tried to start conversations with teachers, tried to engage and felt, shot down or dismissed, which negatively impacted their willingness to reach out again. And parents spoke about the importance of inviting parents to be active and contributing members of the school community, where parents were asked for their input in a sincere way, and educators and parents kind of learned from each other. And again, that would extend to the the school councils, wanting to have a voice, right? And that's what you do. And so as well, parents spoke about the importance of taking time, listening, establishing connections, intentionally creating spaces where people feel comfortable, and the importance of ceremony and elder presence as well. At the same time, non-Indigenous teachers also expressed anxiety and uncertainty around how to respectfully engage with Indigenous parents, and the best approach to establish positive interactions and foster meaningful relationships. So it was as if we kind of had, like when I was talking to parents, they'd say, I'm not really sure, overwhelmingly, this was the feedback I received and the experiences I heard about was that parents were saying, I'm not really sure how to engage. I'm not really sure about, how do I come in and ask questions? And kind of when I do, I don't feel that I'm being heard. And then on the other side, we have teachers who say, I'm really not sure how to be interacting with Indigenous parents. I don't want to come off as racist. So it's almost as like kind of both the parents and teachers were kind of missing. They weren't, parents also saying, I'd like to come in. I could, teachers are trying to incorporate Indigenous content in schooling. I could help with that. There's things I could do to help at school, but, not really knowing how to come in and get involved, right? On the other side, we have teachers saying, I don't really know how to engage Indigenous parents, right? Or have conversations with Indigenous parents without coming off, in a way that I, don't mean to, because they're so concerned. So it's almost like people were kind of missing versus connecting. And so I have these quotes here, and this first parent, and again, this gives you the context about why some parents may not be able to come to the school council. So this parent said, and this parent was really struggling because her child was really being bullied really, really badly at school, where the person was saying to her child, go kill yourself, right? It was so bad. And this parent just felt so uncomfortable coming to the school. She just wanted to support her kid, but really had a hard time even coming on school grounds and entering the school building because of the issues she had previously had within schooling. So this parent said, I don't feel comfortable going into meetings at school. Because I feel judged a lot and I don't like that feeling. So I'd rather just exclude myself from it. I grew up in a very prejudiced upbringing. I dealt with a lot. And so I don't feel comfortable putting myself out there. That's why I feel comfortable with emails and phone calls, because I feel if they don't see me, or really because my kids don't look Native, but I do, I feel that they I feel that if they see who I was, they wouldn't take me seriously. I'd just rather not go there. So this parent, wanting to support her child was getting really bullied at school, but she just was really struggling, with her own issues to come into the school and try to address this with her child and, with the school. So lots of conflict, right, for this parent, full of anxiety, not sure how to, get around this, and not feeling heard at all from the school when she tried to reach out by email or phone. And so, and then the second quote here, this Indigenous parent here saying, I want you to hear me. We're really fighting for that, because our ancestors cried when they died because their voices weren't heard. I'm proud to hear you share, proud to hear your voices, all of us here, because hearing the ancestors' cries, the doors they tried to knock down and nobody heard them. And now we're still trying to pound on that. It hurts. If I walk into a school, I should be able to walk in and no one's going to label me or put a condition on me. And the condition is that I have no voice. That's where they took our voice away. We need to get that back. We can make a difference. So parents saying, wanting to get involved, not sure how or want to get involved, but really full of anxiety and stress that they're really trying to get over many barriers to even be able to get into the school and make contact. And then on the other side, I have these quotes from teachers. So similarly, from a teacher's perspective, several were feeling anxiety and uncertainty about how to respectfully engage with Indigenous parents and build bridges of understanding and respect. So there's a clear theme among the findings that more awareness about Indigenous people's cultures, histories, and experiences and ways of knowing among non-Indigenous teachers and students is important. As well, time and dedicated effort is needed to foster relationships based on trust, respect, and understanding. And so here are these quotes I'll share with you. So these were all from teachers, non-Indigenous teachers. And so this teacher said, if I were to have an interaction with an Indigenous parent, I'm feeling very anxious about this conversation because I just don't want to offend. I'm a ball of anxiety. And this teacher said, there are Indigenous parents who probably come in and without me even knowing, they're thinking, oh, what does she see in them? She probably thinks ABC about me, right? And then there's me looking, being like, oh, please don't think ABC about me, right? As much as I get uncomfortable sometimes with trying not to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, I'm sure there's a lot of parents who come to me and I don't even realize that they're doing the same thing, right? And then this last quote here, so from a non-Indigenous teacher saying, I'm very not malicious person in general. And so when talking to someone, when they get defensive and they get that tone, like how could you think that, that kind of tone, I feel like, oh, you feel like I'm doing this out of malice or trying to be disrespectful and racist, right? So teachers just trying so hard not to come across a certain way that it makes, again, teachers feeling anxious about the conversations as well. So again, kind of missing each other. Parents, a lot of parents said, I want to come and be involved in schools. I want to get involved. I'm not sure how. The knowledge I have, the experiences I have, I don't think it's necessarily would fit in that environment. When reality is, teachers are really looking to support Indigenous content in schooling, and having parents, caregivers, family members come in and support, that learning. I think, the teachers I spoke with would love that. But again, on the other hand, we have lots of teachers who again are struggling with trying to build those connections with parents. And so for some of the key learnings I wanted to highlight for you. And so we've talked about experiences and perspectives related to family-school relationships and family-school interactions. And now we'll move on to talk about kind of these promising practices to foster meaningful relationships between Indigenous families and schools. This work has highlighted key themes important for fostering relationships and understanding between Indigenous families and schools. Participants stress that schools and educators need to take steps to ensure that Indigenous parents are being heard, respected, and valued at their children's school. Parent involvement was associated with parents feeling that their voice was being heard at their children's school, and that they're working alongside educators to support their children's education, and that they have a shared understanding about how their children are doing in school. And this presentation draws attention to the promise of creating possibilities to bridge divisions or tensions that may characterize relationships between Indigenous families and schools through practices that empower Indigenous parents to participate as knowledgeable and active partners, working collaboratively with educators to support their children's education. So it's crucial for schools to have spaces and mechanisms in place to ensure parents, and specifically Indigenous parents, can bring their own ideas, perspectives, and knowledge forward in a manner that contributes to schooling processes that support students and embraces, diverse experiences, strengths, and resources within the school community as a whole. So key learnings from this big project. I know I highlighted some things for you, but overall things, in the other slides, I was able to highlight some quotes and things to kind of hit home what I wanted to, convey today in this presentation, these key findings. But I wanted to also highlight just some, things that were, I heard over and over again. So key learnings. So really the significance, we're talking about building connections and fostering relationships between Indigenous families and schools, and engaging Indigenous families within schools. I heard about the significance of ensuring that Indigenous parents, caregivers, and community members are heard and involved in meaningful ways to improve schools. And that may be another thing, because the school council, extending that to family members, right? Even if it's not a parent, it could be a caregiver, it could be a grandparent, any of those individuals, right? But just ensuring that, that people are being heard, right? And I know you're doing that work already. But within schools, that needs to happen for sure. Inviting parents to work with schools as partners to support their children's education, and ensuring awareness about Indigenous people's cultures, histories, experiences, and ways of knowing among non-Indigenous teachers and students. So there's a lot of misunderstanding out there, and we need to work on that as well. And then also having a full-time self-identified Indigenous person at individual school sites was something I heard over and over and over and over again. So key promising practices and things in terms of fostering meaningful relationships and engaging families, fostering, again, opportunities for parents' voices to be heard at their children's school, and for parents to work alongside schools and teachers to support their children's education. And again, having a full-time self-identified Indigenous person at individual school sites. So these are kind of big promising practices, which are things that you're doing already and things I wanted to highlight when we talk about kind of what you could do within the school council, which is where we're moving now. So extending this learning. So I've shared, kind of several things. We talked about experiences and perspectives related to family school relationships and family school interactions to kind of give you that background, broader context of where some of these parents are coming from. As well, promising practices to foster meaningful relationships, really making sure people have a voice, that they're feeling heard, and also having, people at school to help support that, like an Indigenous liaison worker. And now we'll talk about kind of, how can this learning be extended to the work of school councils? So I have some considerations. I thought that, in terms of answering the how question. Next steps with reference to what you could actually do, I have some considerations here. And these are just ideas. I'm hoping we can open it up and have a broader conversation and have a discussion in a few minutes. But these are things that I thought, based on the work I've done, based on what I've heard over and over again from parents and teachers and students, these are things that I thought kind of might be considerations for you. So the first one, and I'll have slides for each of these, but the first one here, efforts to promote Indigenous parent-family engagement in the school council and education, participate in planning, celebrating Indigenous people's events and days, and if appropriate, support advocacy around having a full-time self-identified Indigenous person at your school. So an Indigenous liaison worker, someone who can be there. I've been in schools where they've had a cookum, right? Like they've had an Indigenous grandparent who's there, or an elder who's there, somebody who is just kind of at the school to support that broader learning and things. And so all these things came out as, significant from my project. And then also, or all of my projects really, these are themes I've heard over and over and over again, literally for the 10 years I've been working on this, if not more. And also furthering knowledge and understanding within the school, also within the council. And these tie to the promising practices and key learnings from my projects. So you may be thinking, okay, so where can we do this, or how would we go about doing this? And so before I talk a little bit further about these considerations, I heard that and I learned about your joint annual planning collaboration and how this, contributes to student success. So the joint annual plan. And I thought this might be kind of a helpful way if you're thinking about, what can we do, or how can we put this in place? This is a great place to start. So before I talk about these considerations, this again talks more about the how can we go about doing this? And that's referring to your annual planning. So my understanding is that some councils have kind of, may get to the point where they have maybe a bit of an uncertainty around their purpose, or may find themselves struggling to figure out kind of, what do we do now? Or maybe not really sure about their drive or direction they're going in, or that they're heading. And so, the purpose of this document that was shared with me was trying to identify common purpose, inclusive of various school leaders, teams, that kind of many people could kind of get behind and support, recognizing that many different school teams, administrators, the school council, people who work on fundraising and things, other groups, you may have different priorities, but maybe this is a way to kind of come to, or a process anyway, to kind of come to shared priorities that you can work on together. And you have this document, so I don't need to go into it in super detail here, but this is just, again, somewhere where you can go. So exploring meetings with leaders, some of these considerations may be something you want to bring together to those conversations. So, number one, exploring meeting with leaders. So having meetings together, trying to identify some priorities or projects that, together people could focus on, and then bringing that back to the respective audiences. Step two, developing developing ideas in meetings, and so sharing feedback from your respective groups back with that. So a second meeting back with the, the leaders, sharing what you heard back from school councils, for example, in that leader meeting, and what teachers, feedback that administrators had received, hearing back from respective groups about what they thought about the priorities that people had identified, and then identifying some key priorities that maybe together these different leaders and different teams working within schools can work on. Taking action, step 3, leaders in their respective teams start to work towards the needs to accomplish these goals, and then evaluate and repeat the process. So at the end of the year, what were people able to accomplish? At the beginning of the next year, kind of reassess, where do we leave off? What are our priorities this year? What haven't we finished? What are we in the middle of? And how did it go last year? And how can we improve, or what direction should we take this year? So this may be a place where you could kind of, try to incorporate some of these considerations in this kind of annual planning collaboratively with other teams in the school. So just kind of highlighting some of those considerations I thought you may want to consider. And so the first one was promoting Indigenous family and parent engagement. So I wrote so much when I was talking about this. And so I know that I can't talk for 5 hours about all these things, even though I feel like sometimes I can, and I can, but I won't do that. But I wanted to highlight, about promoting, parent engagement. So this ties into the promising practice I identified relating to fostering opportunities for parent voices to be heard at their children's schools. And so again, annual planning, that's something that you can do with the goal for authentic, meaningful engagement with Indigenous families. And so, for example, something you could do is, advise and lead the development of appropriate strategies and processes related to advancing understanding and awareness among Indigenous students and staff related to supporting the needs of Indigenous students, but also, understanding about Indigenous culture and history and experiences. So leading an effort like that. So ideally, school councils, again, could perhaps bring this into their annual plan, but also sharing that. So the idea that, part of this work, might be for, school councils to maybe identify some of these things you want to work on, bring it on to the annual plan, but also try to promote, like extending invitations to join the school council, maybe flyers, having, and I'm sure you have lots of meetings about how you can promote engagement, but, having flyers, having your annual plan, having an idea of, what each of the meetings are going to be about that you can kind of distribute to parents at schooling events, at, different events that you can show up at, maybe have a booth or a table or something to kind of hand these things out. That might be something that would be, that parents can maybe kind of connect with. And if you extend invitations to join school council, and, putting it out there that we're looking for people, for example, if this is something, again, these are just considerations, but maybe something you want to do to try to engage Indigenous parents within the school councils is to, as part of your invitations, to kind of, get the word out about what you're doing, is to include maybe on your flyers or what you're talking about in terms of trying to get the word out that you're looking for, diversity within your school council, but maybe also that you're looking for parents and caregivers with knowledge about Indigenous cultures and histories and experiences, and an interest in and respect for Indigenous cultures to help with school planning and preparation. And so by putting that out there, that you're looking for people who may be having, experiences with this, knowledge, that may kind of open a door where people can say, oh, I have, some knowledge about this that I can contribute to. Also, hosting a family night or many to engage Indigenous families at the school, and giving a short presentation there, again, handing out materials, and again, even saying we're looking to, support, having, different voices, a variety of voices, in particular, trying to, have individuals with experience and knowledge about Indigenous histories and experiences and cultures. By putting that out there, I think, that would be a kind of, again, open that invitation. And you have incredible resources on your website. And so this Empowering the Spirit, hosting a family night, this link here that I've included, this can be found, like this link was on your website, but it gives you kind of a breakdown of how you could have an Indigenous family event at your school. And I think not only is this kind of a good idea, for many, many reasons, but also the idea of including Indigenous parents and caregivers, extending that invitation, opening it up, really does link to the importance of equity, diversity, inclusion in school councils. And so if we're talking about, referring to a school council or general policies, programs, promoting the, the representation here. So if you're talking about policies or programs or the school council the school council in general, having diverse perspectives, individuals of different backgrounds, people bringing different experiences, skills, and expertise to the table, I think could really enhance what you're doing. And that, ties into, again, equity, diversity, inclusion, but equity in particular refers to ensuring the fair access to equitable opportunities for everybody, without barriers, right? So kind of including, everybody, that may want to participate. Also inclusivity, referring to building a culture where a variety of people have a voice and that everyone feels welcome by actively inviting every person or every group to contribute and participate. So again, this supports and embraces, differences and offers respect to everyone in words and actions, right? So again, just extending that invitation, I think that, with different perspectives, again, could really enhance the overall work of the school council. So again, just targeted kind of promoting, engaging in ways that you may be able to kind of encourage Indigenous families to get involved. So the second thing I had as my considerations was for celebrating Indigenous related events. So this is from the Alberta, the Government of Alberta government website, Indigenous events. I have the link here, but here are some ones that may be of interest to you. So one thing you could do for your school council is you can efforts to, yes, promote Indigenous parents and caregiver engagement in the school council. And that may even be related to planning and celebrating Indigenous people's events, right? So saying, we'd like to get involved in this. Does anybody want to help promote or help us organize some of these things? And again, there's several days that you can, kind of get involved in. And this is, again, what could we really do here in terms of how you could kind of, take the stuff I've talked about, how you could implement it and run with it. This is definitely a great way to do that. Get involved with planning Indigenous Peoples Day. So the National Indigenous History Month. So this is in June, with June 21st as Indigenous Peoples Day. So getting involved there. Orange Shirt Day. So getting behind, maybe supporting, getting orange shirts or something, right? So there's so many ways that, schools can help kind of promote or get involved in some of these things. And what's interesting about Indigenous Peoples Day or month is that it's coming up. And so something you may want to think about doing is, although it's, it's coming up, it's a great time to start thinking about maybe what's happening for Indigenous Peoples Day, what's being done, who can contribute to planning from the parent committee, the parent community and the school council. Is there something at your school, that your school council can do now or help plan now or in June? Is there someone, so a person or somebody that you can engage now in those conversations? And then is there a way to support that understanding that at the end of June, the school council may be finished for the year, but that you can still kind of actively plan ahead, be active in events and celebrations. So showing up to some of the events that they have. I know a school, they're doing powwows, they're doing, little round dances, they're doing little things at their schools, even showing up and participating in those kind of things. If you can't help plan them, there's always next year. But Indigenous Peoples Day, it's coming up. So that might be kind of a great opportunity to get involved with that, but also, help to extend the invitation to maybe Indigenous families and caregivers that may be able to help contribute to planning. So importance of, you can even plan ahead, right? So Orange Shirt Day, September 30th, Sisters and Spirit Day. This is related to honoring missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. This is October 4th. So a lot of these things kind of happen at the beginning of the year. So you could plan ahead also for next year. And again, great opportunity to extend the invitation and say, are there any parents that might be able to help us with planning related to this? And if appropriate, advocacy for a self-identified Indigenous person at school. So I don't know if this is appropriate. Again, this is just an idea, something again that related to the promising practices I've heard related to supporting Indigenous students and also Indigenous family engagement in schooling. But this may be appropriate if this is something that, with me, it's been shared over and over and over again as something that's extremely significant for families and students. And so that might be something, if you can, asked around, if you got some feedback from students, from parents about if this is something, that they're interested in, maybe that's the kind of something you could kind of help advocate for. And again, it's something I've heard over and over and over and over and over again. People are always talking about this, that we need more of this. These individuals can offer cultural expertise, consultation, guidance, help with at the school, fostering meaningful connections and relationship between families and parents, as well as schools and educators. They can also be a mediator role between the family and the school and kind of help facilitate conversations with teachers. And also facilitate and support that understanding and awareness among non-Indigenous teachers and students. And so, maybe if a full-time person, isn't possible, maybe even advocating and kind of getting behind the idea of having someone come in part-time. Maybe several schools, hiring somebody that someone can spend, 1 day a week at different schools, for example. So there's a way to kind of, have a position like this that's kind of spread across schools as well. So a part-time person or someone come even for an hour once a week. So if you don't have somebody and the school, community would like to have somebody, this might be kind of something that you could kind of help advocate and get behind as well, if it's appropriate. And the last thing I thought, again, that would be really helpful for the school council is also just to kind of extend your own, further your own awareness and understanding, related to just kind of learning. So efforts to promote Indigenous parent-family engagement in, school council and education. We talked about all these things, but a way to also do that is to kind of further your own understanding. There's so many resources here. So this ties to the learning from my project that I shared, identified with reference to ensured more awareness about Indigenous peoples' cultures, experiences, histories, and ways of knowing among non-Indigenous teachers and students, and also the school community. And I want to highlight that your website has lots and lots of great resources. And these are just things that are some examples of resources, but there's so many things out there. And again, if you're looking for things, I'd go right to your website and look at all the resources that are there. And so some of these things are on your website. I think actually several of them are, but these are just some examples. So Empowering the Spirit, I believe that's on your website. Voices of the Land, that's something that's through the libraries actually, which is a really cool website. So these are just some other things. So just opening the invitation, saying if you'd like to do a little bit more, you could also start with kind of creating more awareness and understanding among people participating in the school council. And lots of resources and ways to start that. Even the U of A Indigenous Canada course, that's a free course, and it's a really neat course that you can do online that kind of helps, again, with furthering that understanding. So maybe something you could do and get behind with the school as well, more generally, or also just specifically with your school council. And this is a neat resource. And again, so many resources out there, but I just thought this is kind of a one place to go where there's so many resources, and it's from the Alberta Teachers Association, and it's just a document from the Stepping Stones, which you have links to on your website for Indigenous education resources. And there's so many things on here. So lots out there if you wanted to extend your learning. So I wanted to kind of open it up for questions. I know I've talked for a long time. Just to kind of start with, could your school council connect? So I'll just pose these questions and maybe we can open it up for a discussion. But I'll leave these with you and we can think about it and kind of have some discussion. Maybe you could ask some questions if you'd like about the bigger projects and stuff I've talked about, but just to get you thinking, how could your school council connect with Indigenous parents and caregivers and family members? Are your school divisions meaningfully and intentionally engaging with Indigenous parents and families already? And if they are, if there's an Indigenous advisory council, if there's, somebody out there, right, or a committee or a council out there already, is there a way that you could bridge that in a way where the school council could work together to build a shared understanding and shared planning, bridging school community together as one community? If you're already doing something at the school, can you tap into that in terms of kind of bridging that and connecting that and maybe doing something together? Are Indigenous families be engaged in the school division or school system, your school division or even school in a different way? Is there some way that you could kind of get connected to that? And even if your school already has an Indigenous liaison worker, that is a great place to go if you're trying to, trying to connect with more Indigenous families. If you have Indigenous, lunch, an Indigenous student club, if you have any kind of initiatives that are already happening at your school, showing up to some of those, handing out some flyers, trying to get the word out that you'd love, people with different perspectives, especially, awareness of Indigenous cultures, histories, experiences, to kind of join the school council and contribute perspectives and voice. That would be a great place to go as well. So Indigenous liaison workers, but any kind of Indigenous related initiatives happening at the school would be a great place to go for sure. So tap into what's already happening, see what's happening, see if you can get involved, but especially if schools are already doing something to engage with families, that might be a great place to start and kind of connect with. So yeah, that's kind of my presentation. I hope we could kind of have a conversation and open it up. Thoughts, feelings?
I always hate the uncomfortable silence.
And I'm
I have
always
to-
so I'm waiting. For someone else.
I have to find a way to fill it. So, Emily, you did not disappoint, and I knew you wouldn't. And I'm absolutely astounded at how you tied your research so seamlessly to the work of school councils, and providing that information about the perspectives. And it was interesting because I was, as you were speaking the quotes and I was reading the quotes, I was thinking, wow, yeah, I have felt like that, right? Like I have felt like those teachers afraid to have the conversation, right? Or to misstep or to say something inappropriate, lest I offend somebody. And it's, if it's difficult for those professionals, those teachers, and I know the myriad of supports that are available through the ATA and everywhere else, right? And the really hard work that the ATA is doing on trying to help teachers become more comfortable and help teachers, be able to teach the curriculum. I mean, some of them are so concerned about teaching, Indigenous history when, they don't know Indigenous history. And now they have to teach, the students Indigenous history. So I know the ATA is doing a phenomenal job, but if teachers are still feeling uncomfortable about, having those conversations, how can we possibly expect that parents on school councils would be feeling not uncomfortable, right? And that this would just be second nature for them. I mean, yeah, sure, we can talk to anybody, right? Like if the educational leaders in our school communities are struggling, it's not unreasonable to expect that parents on school councils are struggling too. So some of the suggestions you have are fantastic, like really, really good. And I really appreciated that you wove in I don't know what shape that is, the double helix or whatever it is of the assurance framework, right? And the work that's being done and how school councils play such an integral role with that as well, and the joint annual planning. So thank you for that. So I would invite anybody else to, make a comment or ask a question. I saw some people taking notes. I know I was taking some notes. I've got some questions, but I don't want to be the only one that asks.
So I wasn't sure if we should raise hands or not. So I put my hand up. But thank you very much, Emily. That was so informative, so good to hear, and gave some wonderful ideas. Our school district has a wisdom and guidance committee. So there's a lot of teachers involved in that. And we have a few Indigenous peoples who are involved in that. But you spoke to things that can bridge from that group right back into the schools, which I think is so very helpful. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I had my hand up because I'm out in Edmonton Mill Woods at our school, just the elementary school down the road. There's 11 official languages. It's such a cultural diversity, and yet our Greta Gersner is on my school council. She was at elementary and now is at junior high. And she said it really well at our meeting that we had of our council. We are all of one race here. Like, we don't have a lot of diversity, and she's not happy about it. And she's a mover and a shaker, as you all know, as being a director. So it's great to have other people have that aha and then want to act on it. We've, because of it being Mill Woods, we've had people on our council that are Indigenous, but I had a hard time because I thought they were First Nations, and what's the label? What do I call? And so again, like Wendy, I want to be respectful. I don't want to call somebody something and then have them mad at my ignorance. I had no idea. But I think it's great that we have these important markers like Indigenous Day, and it's the day before my birthday, so I'll party right on. And I love that there's powwow that we had at Klondike Days, capital X or whatever they called it. So really, really cool that that we have those opportunities, but they just seem like a little tiny grain of sand in a big, huge desert. So I would love to help bring them to fruition, but I also, we're now a Francophone school. So now we have that culture, and that relates back to Métis. So I love that, because then we can highlight both, and we're not making one of those 11 official languages more official. Does that make sense? I mean, aside from English, because I can't speak French. So, and I'll just put on a little different spin here. I'm American. And so my history absolutely completely different from probably what you all have experienced. And so that is just another layer. And I usually don't pull out that card in the last 15 years. I used to pull it out all the time. But anyhow, I just kind of want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and that community is really, really important to me. So I want to be, like Michelle said, informed in a way, and be a helper with it, and not the person in the room that because of this face is not making them feel a part of everything going on. So sorry to get on a little soapbox there, but so it's really well done. And your last name is Milne. Are you related at all to Don Milne out of Toronto?
No.
He was a big Boy Scout here in Edmonton, and a really great mentor of mine. So I got a community builder through the SAGE. He actually founded SAGE, the Senior Association of Greater Edmonton, and your last name is the same as his, so I had to ask. It's a great last name.
You can pronounce it, no one can, so it's always nice if you know someone else anyway with the same last names used, so it helps with that.
But yeah, I loved it. It was really, really great, and thank you for letting me crash, and sorry to take the box, but and I'm going to read Crystal's book. I'm going to look up that. So I've learned a lot just sitting here listening to y'all.
But I think what you said is important too, because there's been a lot of research about school councils, and there's even, I think, in the Education Act actually to join the school council and participate in things like that across Canada. In the Education Acts, it says about joining the school council for parents as a responsibility, and even the list of parent responsibilities are having a positive relationship with the school and having positive interactions with teachers. Well, it's kind of hard for some people to do that if you've had such a horrible experience with schooling, but yet these are broad practices where we say it's the responsibility of parents, and they must, right? Like, that's kind of the way that some of these things are framed. But who actually joins school councils, even if it's in this Education Acts and stuff like that, it just tends to be it doesn't tend to be that diverse, I guess I should say, right? And so a lot of research has shown that, even though we say, school councils, not a lot of people, from different backgrounds may end up participating. And so I think it's a broader issue as well, like definitely Indigenous families, whatever you can do to try to engage. I think with school councils, you're probably happy, to engage all the parents, anybody who can show up, right? Because sometimes you may not even have a big group at your school at all, let alone of kind of different backgrounds. So I'm sure that kind of recruiting, getting the message out, you know, is a big, you know, something that you do think about. But then also that idea of diversity, like, you know, EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion is a big thing right now. We hear it all the time. And that again plays into your school councils, right? Like the more diverse your council is going to be, the different, the different kinds of ideas you're going to get that are going to inspire and drive and direct what you're doing. You know, and it's just that everyone has different experiences and backgrounds and thoughts and ideas and insights and stuff, right? So, you know, definitely advocating for including Indigenous families for sure. But, you know, there's a point to also say, you know, it's all families for sure, but, you know, just diversity in general, like Tammy talking about, you know, there's so many different families at the schools, you know, but maybe it's, you know, they're not reflected within the school council, like the school community is not reflected there. So that's maybe a bigger conversation as well. What can we do about that? And again, EDI is something we talk about all the time. It's everywhere. We hear about it all the time. So, you know, that's another conversation, part of this conversation, but perhaps a bigger conversation for sure.
Well, and we got really lucky because we did have several people of Indigenous that were on our board, and they started out as our kindergarten rep, you know, and then that way they're there from the start of kindergarten with their youngest, and then it just grows and they have, you know, 3 or 4 kids. So we got lucky because then we had that continuity, and then they knew not just Division 1 kindergarten, you know, younger kids stuff, but they then knew the, you know, grades Division 2, 4, 5, 6, and then eventually junior high, high school. And that way we had continuity because they had a large family, but they brought that diversity for us. It was really great because then we had somebody in the room to help speak to that. And her husband actually was a veteran in a US military, but he was our speaker on Remembrance Day. And it was just so cool and meaningful because they had, for me anyway, they have both countries, which I thought, woo, and then a way of making it not just Veterans Day, which I grew up with, but also Remembrance Day, which is your. So I think if we have connections like that and bigger events, I know a lot of people are away from remembrance, but that's another type of reconciliation, right? That whole. And now we have this Ukraine situation, which is another opportunity for a type of reconciliation. I think so. This just plants a seed and helps you, I think, build from that. So sorry.
No, it's great that you're talking and sharing. And you know
So
what,
Emily, sorry, I'm going to interrupt because I really need to ask a question before Crystal, Michelle, and Tammy disappear. So as you were presenting, I was having this thought, and I'd actually had this thought a couple of weeks ago that we really needed to have you at our conference, which we just came off of. It was just this last weekend. And that was my gap, right? In that I should have realized that when you said that you would do this time for the webinar because of your teaching schedule, I should have said, no, I don't want you for the webinar. I want you for the conference then, right? If the end of April works best for you. So the question I have, and you can tell me no, okay, you can say, nope, not this time around, Wendy. The participants here tonight get a copy of the recording. Do I have your permission to include the recording in the email we're sending out to all the conference attendees with the recordings of the breakout sessions there and say, you know, bonus gift from Professor Emily Milne, webinar on this day. She should have been at the conference, our mistake. But I need your permission. And then I need, of course, Tammy and Crystal and Michelle's permission because they are part of that recording and I can't send that out to 200 people without their permission. So that's why I had to interrupt. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I'm fine with that. You can also send out, but you have some of my stuff on your website as well. So like, I'm happy. And I know that I said end of April was easiest for me, but like, I'm happy to support, like, you know, I'm full on into school council stuff. Like I fully support what you're doing. So I'm happy to come back and share and talk. Like, I know I said April was easiest for me, but you know, I'm throughout the year, if you need me to do something, like I'm here for you. So
thank you. And definitely pen in the second last weekend of April next year. Because and I'll get on that much sooner this year. But yeah, a couple of weeks ago I went, oh, I should have invited Emily to the conference. Why did I not do that? But anyways, so yeah, so Tammy, Michelle, Crystal, any objection if this recording goes out with the other? We have not quite 18 breakout sessions because 2 of them asked that we not record them, and 3 out of our 4 plenaries said that we could record. So we'll be sending out about what is that, 21 recordings, and I would love to include this as a bonus to get your work out there, to get your suggestions. I don't think I've ever heard anybody tie their work so well to the work of school council. Like bang on, you nailed it. So yeah, and I need more people to hear about it, and we need to start a movement. So thank you so much for agreeing to letting me send it out. And we'll get you in front of people more often, I promise.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I'm definitely here to support you. So
Thank you. So I noticed that who said, Michelle said no, she has no objections. And Crystal, any objection?
I have no objection personally. Eva and Tatiana are both on the same board as me. I was the one who registered them.
Okay.
I can reach out to them and see if they're okay with it as well. I noticed Eva didn't have her camera on, but Tatiana did for most of it as well. So I can send them a quick email tonight and see if they're okay with that.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
And then the only email I have is, Susan, I got one from you when I registered. Is that the same? Send one back to that one?
Sure, I'll put an email in the chat again.
Or you can even throw mine, Suzanne, while you're working on that. If you want to throw mine in there, that'd be great.
Yeah, I will. I'll check with Tatiana and Eva and see if they're okay with that. But Emily, thank you for sharing. The three of us showed up because my kid's in grade 1 and I joined council last year. And we've had lots of very meaningful conversations. We're at a Spanish bilingual school, so we are quite diverse with Latin American and South American culture within our school here at Edmonton. So we do have a diverse group, but we've had many parent councils where we've talked a lot about Indigenous education. So you've given some ideas there that I can add to what we've already done to our conversations already, and keep promoting. We're thinking of doing an Indigenous education night for in person. We tried and it didn't, well, COVID kind of messed so many things up there this year, but we were fortunate enough to have one of our family members. Our school was built a few years ago and then closed due to COVID, and nobody was allowed in. So we had a parent who came in and did an entire community smudging for our family and our families and our schools. That was incredibly nice to hear in March. But thank you, Emily. There's lots of really great ideas there.
And you have lots of really great resources on your website. Like, I've been in there kind of looking around, and you have a lot of really great stuff there. So even like I said, like a first step could even just be, like trying to learn yourselves, right? And even, talk about that with, trying to get the word out. You're trying to learn yourselves, you're trying to contribute and even extending that invitation for people who may want to contribute to that or have that knowledge or background, right? Like that's kind of another door that people could walk in if they're interested by inviting that, right? And actually connected to Crystal, what you said, your child's in grade 1 this year or was last year? You said this year? Yeah. And Tammy said, some of the parents started when they were just entering the school, right? And then continued. That's related again to kind of engaging families all together with schooling is start young. Right. So let's say you had a flyer, let's say you had invitations, like let's say you're trying to promote, I'm sure you do something, right? So trying to get the word out about school council, if you start young and when parents are first coming into school and it's their first introduction to schooling, by giving out flyers or having, maybe there's an Indigenous liaison worker, there's some sort of something, right? You could kind of put things in all the kids, backpacks to send home. We're looking for people who can contribute different ideas. We're looking for people with different kinds of backgrounds, whatever it is, however you phrase it. But if you can have people who, when they come into schools, already feel that their voice is important and valued, and this is the place to share it, and that you are a group, right? Like you support each other. You're the school council of parents and coming together in the community to support parent voices. This is a place where parent voices can be shared and you support each other. That's a really safe space, right? So just communicating that and doing that young, because I think it would probably be harder. And I find this too, engaging families. If the parent is already, the kids in high school, there may not be as much engagement at that point where the parents maybe not picking up and dropping off, or but when their kids are little and they're first coming to school, that first introduction, like if there's a welcome event, for example, for welcoming new families, you could put up I know this is probably more work for you, right? Popsicle sticks in the park for kindergarten families, any of these things, right? Like, by showing up and trying to get the message out early, your voice matters. all of our voices matter. Like, let's try to contribute to making education better for our kids. Let's be part of the conversation, right? If you start younger, then, I think that would be a really wonderful way to welcome and be welcomed into a school, and have that support, right, within the parent community. But again, starting young, I think would be, like you said, Tammy, and, you have parents and then they continued all the way up, right? It'd be harder, I think, getting parents with older kids, but if you start young, by, younger kids coming in, promoting that, saying your voice matters, I think that would have a big impact for sure.
The diversity is there sometimes though, because like you yourself said, you moved from Ontario, and we had somebody come from Ontario, and they were like, at my board, at my school, we did this and this, and so it was again kind of nice to have that outside looking in, because we weren't in a fishbowl, but then you have that perspective. But again, now that we've become French immersion, after having portables, after having gone from 300 students up to 600, because we had the neighboring schools because they were building schools still, like a lot of diversity for our school, and French immersion seemed like the way that it needed to go so that we wouldn't die on the vine and be closed down. But and so we have people coming from far away, like people busing, because they probably similar to the Spanish aspect of that other school. So it does make it a different ball of wax of people and stuff. But I think we just have to ask, and the ask is hard sometimes because I'm already, tapped, and then here I'm asking you.
Yeah. And that's difficult for sure. And I fully understand and appreciate that. Like, I know that you all got kids, right? And you're busy, and there's so much going on, and you're dedicating your time to the school council to try to, help make schooling better for your kids. And I totally appreciate that and how busy you are for sure. And again, by having more people on your committee, it wouldn't be as, you could share the work around.
So Emily, a question about that invitation. So you said, extend an invitation and ask for help in doing something specific, right? Maybe it's planning a specific event.
Like Indigenous Peoples Day.
Right, exactly. When crafting that invitation, what kind of language is appropriate? What kind of language should be avoided? So, do you specify, dear parents, the school council is sending this letter out to all parents, but specifically we're looking for those with, history, experience, knowledge of Indigenous culture as we look to plan an event for June 21st, Indigenous Peoples Day. Can you say that and it not be, determined as or perceived as being offensive?
I would say draft something and run it by your school, because this could be a really good thing for the annual planning thing that you have, and kind of coming together and having different teams kind of give input on it. Because I think that if you were thinking, I think Indigenous Peoples Day is a really good place to start, because schools are going to be planning something. If you can get involved in that somehow, and maybe get some parents involved in that as well. I think that would be a really good place to start. And then that might be something kind of that some of the other teams can give some input on as well. I had, so this is, what did I say here? So I had this in my slide. I'll put it in your comments here, but that might be a place to start, right? I think I'm adding right things, hopefully.
And I'm also thinking about that, and I don't know if you can answer, but, in Tammy's case where they've got, 19 different languages, so, 19 different cultures, finding the correct words to use to say, we are specifically wanting to, seek broader perspectives on, I don't know, recess activities for kids, and would really like to hear from our Serbian community or our Muslim community or our Indigenous community, or, the listings like that. Like, does that, become offensive?
And that's a good question to even talk to your people at your school about in your leadership. Like, I would probably draft something and then pass it by them. And then many schools have an Indigenous liaison worker or something. And I would involve your community at your school, right? And maybe they, and say, because they're probably, if it's Indigenous Peoples Day, they're probably planning something anyway, right? So just getting involved, like tap into what's already going on. right? As a way to start, right? Because there's already stuff happening. You don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, just maybe join, right? And say, can we support this? Maybe we can help recruit parents. And then, you know what I mean? Like maybe there's something as part of that. Like I like the annual school planning and coming together with other leaders, because if everyone's thinking about the same thing, if you can collaborate, then again, it's less work, right? Tammy's tapped out, everyone's busy, everyone's exhausted, right? But if everybody has their resources, that might be something you could do. And again, Indigenous people say Orange Shirt Day, any of these things, people are going to be doing it anyway. So if you tap into what's already going on and just say, we'd like to help try to promote some parents, and, you know, we'd like to see if we can engage them more so with parent council, you know, is there a way we can involve parents in this, and can we help support that angle of it, or that approach, or that component of it? That might be a really neat thing you can do. And then maybe you could give that, write up something, some neat flyer. I don't know if anyone's familiar with making things that look nice. I can't match anything. I use PowerPoint, but like I also use Canva. Have you ever heard of Canva? No. Oh, you have? So Michelle has, okay, Crystal has. So it's free. I get my students to use it all the time. If they're making flyers or they're doing something, you just like copy and paste your information in there, and then and it has templates that are colorful and pretty. And then it looks like you are super creative, right? And everything matches and all these lovely things. So it's a good way if you're doing a flyer or doing something like that, that might be a good way to do it. And again, pass it by the leadership people or somebody who may give some insight on it. But I'd probably say something like, I tried to put something in the chat, you know, some extending invitations to join the school council or contribute to our planning for Indigenous Peoples Day. We'd like to extend the invitation to parents and caregivers, because the other thing too is it's not just parents. You're going to have caregivers, you're going to have extended family members, you're going to have all these people. It doesn't just have to be a mom or a dad or whoever. Like it might be an aunt, an uncle, it might be a grandparent who wants to contribute their voice and this, you know, the knowledge that they have. You know, again and again and again, I heard from parents saying, I have this knowledge, I'd like to share it, but I don't think it quite fits in the school. But there's, you know, of course that fits in the school, you know, talking about beading, talking about, you know, all these other traditional types of knowledge and things that are of course valid and important and significant, and it's totally a place at schools to share that. But maybe parents don't know that that's something that they could share, right? Like what resources or what, you know, are there things that people could share, right? Putting it out there, right? This is a way to say that. This is, you know, you could work with this, but this is just a place to start anyway. Just saying, you know, with an understanding of Indigenous cultures, histories, traditions, practices, experiences, and interest and respect for, you know, different Indigenous cultures to help with school council planning, preparation of blah, blah, blah. That might be something you want to start with. And again, bring it to the leadership people, see if they want to have some input on it, put it in a lovely Canva flyer or whatever, and put it in the kids' bags. Maybe, I don't know if you do these kinds of things, but like, you know, that might be a really neat thing, and just see what happens. Put a contact information, or maybe have a Facebook group or whatever, right? Reach out. We'd love some input on how we can make the best Indigenous Peoples Day ever. If you have experience or knowledge and want to contribute, right? Just opening the door and saying your voice matters, you know, because your voices really matter a lot. Like, you know, it's interesting. I could talk forever if people don't cut me off and ask questions. This is the problem. But like I was writing a grant and writing these things about parents and students. And like, you know, I always think about, you know, how important it is for parents to be at the table. And have you ever heard of that saying, like nothing about them without them? That is totally about students and families. Education is all about you and your kids. So of course you should be at the table, right? And all parents, you know, having an opportunity and feeling their voice is important and heard is significant, right? So I'm a big advocate for parent involvement for sure, and extending invitations and making sure people know their voices are heard or can be heard, or there's a space for that. I can keep talking if people don't say anything else.
Are you doing the courses at the U of A then? Are you part of that Indigenous?
I'm not, but I did put that in my slides. Like, even if you want me to share
that,
slides with you, I could definitely do that as well if that's of interest.
Well, I'm giving it some thought, because with Girl Guides of Canada and with Scouts Canada, I'm sorry, I'm going to throw a couple volunteer hats out there. Are we still recording? Anyway, because of those other organizations, similar to what Wendy